This might sound very strange to you, but the entire internet weighs as much as a large orange. If someone asks you to weigh the net, you start mentally adding up everything worldwide needed for it to work. From power plants that supply electricity to storage servers, to the gigantic network of undersea cables that connects millions of computers together. And since all of that really adds a lot of weight to the scale, you wouldn't expect the entire cyberspace to weigh about as much as a quarter of a pineapple, would you? Except that the servers, the power plants, the networks, all of that is just the support, the infrastructure that allows the internet to be deployed across the entire planet. And what interests us as users is the information that is hosted there. What can we discover when we open a new window and enjoy calculating the weight of all the information inside? Whether it's music, texts, images, or videos stored and ready to appear on our screens, we realize the weight of knowledge is trivial. The sum total of all this memory is barely heavier than a pear, about 200 grams. And to try to understand why, we need to look at the form this information takes. This video that's currently playing on your screen, before it existed there, where was it before? Let's consider the question differently. When you take a photo with your phone, what are you capturing? The first answer that comes to mind is that we're putting in bits of information stored in binary, a sequence of ones and zeros that ultimately encode the information, the data you want to store. And the only difference between an empty hard drive and a full hard drive is that one of them is filled with bits saturated with 0s and 1s. Yes, except these 0s and 1s, all these bits, have physical reality. They are voltages in electrical circuits, and these voltages are maintained by packets of electrons that have been given a tiny push of energy, to excite them or not. So they're read as zeros or ones. That's when things start getting weird. Because Einstein showed that, in our universe, mass and energy are actually just two sides of the same coin, connected by the famous equation E equals mass times the speed of light squared. And it tells us that energy is just mass in a different form, and vice versa. And in doing so, every bit of data, every packet of activated electrons, which has just a tiny bit more energy than those that aren't, also has a mass that is very slightly higher. This applies to all devices where you upload or receive data, including texts, photos, movies, emojis, megapixel, 3S, or even on a USB stick. Each time, the total number of electrons in the machine's memory that store data remains unchanged. No matter is added to the device, only energy levels change. Do you get it? Storing more data increases mass. And that's what allows us to say that the internet today weighs as much as a quarter of a pineapple. And since about a third of total web traffic is related to pornography, I think we can say that porn weighs, all by itself, nearly 70 grams, which is about the same as the weight of a banana peel. But let's get back to our electrons and the weight of information. And let's take a concrete example, the mass of an email. Many articles online, incidentally, the internet weighs about as much as a zucchini, attempt to estimate how many electrons encode a single bit of information. And even though it largely depends on the medium, it seems that it's always around several tens of thousands. From there, we can already roughly calculate the weight of an email, let's say, of 50 kilobytes. I'll give you the result. The details are in the description. Storing an email's data requires exciting about 9 billion electrons. Together, they weigh barely more than a hemoglobin molecule. So a molecule of blood weighs about the same as an email. Still following the same principle, but with slightly different calculations, a researcher from Berkeley had fun estimating the difference in mass between an e-reader filled to the brim with electronic books and the same one completely empty. And he came up with something on the order of an attogram. That's 10 to the minus 18 grams in magnitude. We're talking about the weight of a small virus. So even the tiniest speck of dust falling on your e-reader is infinitely heavier than the weight of all the knowledge stored in it. Even if all those PDFs weigh almost nothing, as Vos trois fois said, nothing 3 times is still something. And to get an idea of the weight of the entire internet, all you have to do is apply the same process to all the data stored around the world. And that's how, more than 13 years ago now, the physicist Russell Seitz came to write a short paper. Considering the hundreds of millions of servers, the total mass of all electrons involved is estimated at about 50 grams, to allow for the storage and distribution of all the information that the internet contained at the time. Vsauce, who is undeniably one of my favorite creators, even made a short video about it. explaining that all internet data together weighs about as much as a large strawberry, and the internet keeps getting heavier. Because the information stored there doubles every 5 years, we can estimate the internet now weighs about 50 falcon feathers, or a third of a melon. Imagine that. Try to really grasp this. It's not just a mind game. Information is stored as a tiny amount of energy level, and therefore as the mass of about a quarter of a pineapple. And now, do you see where I'm going with this? What's true for information storage through the energy levels of electrons also applies to batteries, but on a much larger scale. It's estimated that fully charging your phone's battery makes it gain about 100 million times more weight than filling up its memory to the brim. And the internet weighs as much as 200 grams of spinach. They were out of spinach. So when you charge the battery of an electric car or your phone, you're literally filling it up with electricity. You're increasing the stored energy accumulated by electrons spinning around ions in your battery, and at no point is the nature or the number of atoms inside it changed. Their electrons were pushed away from the nucleus, entering a state that lets them release energy later. And since mass and energy are equivalent, a charged battery is therefore very slightly heavier than an empty one, even though no matter has been added to it. For a 200 kilogram electric battery, the mass difference between empty and full is about half a microgram. This corresponds to the weight of a droplet of water with a diameter of 1/10 of a millimeter, a tiny droplet of energy that allowed you to fill up. You must find all this strange by now. If not, you are either very strange yourself or a physicist. If you studied chemistry in school, this probably seems absurd since you were always told this. Here's what I was told. During a chemical reaction, like in a battery, mass is always conserved. It's the same at the start and end, but that's actually not true. It's a practical simplification since the mass difference at the start and end of a reaction is negligible. But the fact remains that all chemical reactions involve the creation or destruction of infinitesimal amounts of mass turning into energy, or energy turning into mass. And these transformations are nothing exceptional or exotic. It's something that happens everywhere, all around us, inside us, every time there's a reaction. There is no magic reservoir from which you can draw energy out of nothing. You see the idea, it's right there in front of you, shining. Combusting gas like methane or butane converts about 1/10 billionth of the original molecule's mass into energy. It's negligible, but it's not nothing. In other words, a lighter flame is a machine that transforms a certain amount of mass into radiation. The mass of molecules formed by the reaction is always less than that of the original elements, because a tiny part has been transformed into binding energy and was emitted as radiation. We live in a universe where mass and energy are basically the same in different forms. During this kind of combustion, the changes in mass are minimal and are therefore very often neglected, on the order of 0.00001%. But in the core of our nuclear power plants, the uranium fission processes convert 0.08% of the atom's mass into pure energy, and at the center, stars like the sun. It's about 0.7% of the mass of hydrogen that, during fusion processes, can be transformed into energy. If you're also amazed that the internet weighs about as much as a small eggplant, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Because since they'll be stored somewhere, you'll indirectly make it weigh more in the game. Well then, the real question is it really a good idea? Considering that nearly 15% of the world's electricity is used to circulate and move, at our discretion, everything that the internet hosts, I wonder if, despite its lightness, the entire web might not need to go on a banana diet. I'll try to think about that next time I format. The internet weighs a little more than a big tomato. And I want to point out that in this video, every fruit and vegetable shown was precisely weighed and gave its consent to participate. Turn on the bell for updates and follow me on Insta. It's just between us and the internet. But sometimes I post things there that have absolutely nothing to do with any of this, and even memes.